I'm really working on my exercise intolerance while living with migraine and bouts of fatigue. And one, I want to preface that I'm only doing this and able to do this because I'm on the right medication now. Actually, I don't even know if it's fully like the right medication, but I have medication that does help me if and when a flare-up happens. And I wanted to talk about what that pacing looks like, because pacing, while it's, a very physical thing, and a lot of people have understandably a lot of trouble figuring out what the right pace is for themselves, I want to talk a little bit about the emotional part, because the emotional part is important to expect alongside the physical part. When you're trying to pace yourself, which usually for a lot of us means slowing down, sometimes it also means speeding up. It just depends on kind of your nervous system and the speed at which your nervous system runs. I tend to run very, very quick and fast, and so my task in life is always learning how to slow down. And with that comes a lot of grief about what you lose when you can't go as fast as you would like to. And so we deal with that through acknowledging the grief, accepting the grief, allowing it to be there, knowing it won't be there forever. It will come and go, ebb and flow. And then also trust that slower still counts, and not only does it still count, but it actually probably gets you further faster. And that's really, really hard to believe when you're somebody that moves and runs, that moves really fast. But I think this is why stories like the tortoise and the hare probably developed for young kids, to help them learn this lesson that moving slower often gets you at the same place, at the same time, sometimes faster, maybe sometimes a little bit slower, but not enough to really count, and without all of the trouble and heartache and body ache that comes along with moving fast. So yeah, I am working on exercise intolerance, currently walking at the park with weights in my hands, just 4-pound weights, while I'm walking. And for me, what that helps is a lot of the tension in my shoulders. Got this exercise from my husband, who is a personal trainer who works with a lot of joint and mobility issues with older people. So again, if you see someone talking about exercise intolerance or training their way out of chronic illness, just know that there's so many facets that go into that. There's medication, there's physical therapy, there's the luxury and privilege of being able to rest if you do accidentally push yourself too hard. There's the luxury of just having the time to go for a walk. There's so much privilege, I think, in the healing space that doesn't get named. And that doesn't mean that if you don't have privilege that you can't do some of these things. I'm not trying to take anyone's hope away from them. I just don't know that any of us can really ethically talk about getting better or working on ourselves without acknowledging the privilege that is inherent in this space. So just some food for thought. There's so many other things to keep in mind too. This has been such a trial and error journey for literally 15 years for me. But for example, it's been really, really, really hot this summer, as we all know, and couple days ago, I took my kids out. I was outside for 2.5 hours, and I knew pretty much right away, okay, this was a bad idea. But unfortunately, as a mom, there are times where I would have kind of turned around and went home and knew that what was best in that moment was to take care of myself. In this particular day, on this particular instance, I decided to prioritize their joy and happiness. And I think as a parent, we get to make that decision. There's no right or wrong. But I did do that. I let them kind of enjoy their day. I knew I was gonna have a migraine, and I did. I got a really bad migraine attack later that night, and I just, had to pass my kids off to my husband and kind of take care of myself. And so then we stayed home yesterday, and then today I walked outside and I was like, it's a little bit cooler out today. So normally what I would have done in the past was just like stayed home all week. I would have been, one, recovering, but two, I also would have been scared. And I still am. I can feel, we've been out here for an hour. My kids are sweating. I'm pretty hot now. It wasn't that hot when we first got out here. And so, there's a little bit of like that, damn, like I hope I don't get a migraine attack from this. But again, but I have accounted for that. Like I've accounted for, okay, well, I can take some rescue meds today. I've only taken one all week. This is the mental load that it takes sometimes to deal with a chronic illness, is just understanding all of the different facets that go into managing the chronic illness and being able to hold all that in your head. And so while I would love to give you like a 3-step process on how to manage your fear while exercising with a chronic illness, there's so much nuance that goes into each individual person's treatment plan and fear management plan, if you will. So for me, what helps me manage my fear is knowing what kind of support I'll have if I do flare up, knowing if I have medication that actually like works. It might not like completely get rid of a thing, but it will diminish some of that pain. I can move my schedule or know that I have like a time block coming up in my schedule where I can rest and recover. And so some of that is circumstance, but also some of that was also a direct result of changing certain expectations of myself, like changing the expectation that laundry needs to be done all the time and folded neatly in our drawers at all given times. Like I allow my laundry to pile up, much to all of our dismay when we're trying to look for clothes, but that's a choice that I've made and decided to let go of in an effort to reduce some of the stress on my body and in my mind when I have to let something go. I know what I can quickly deprioritize on my to-do list so that I can rest and recover as a first priority when symptoms arise. Managing fear of heat, exercise, food, relationship distress, work priorities, things like that when you have a chronic illness really does require a lot of self-reflection, a lot of understanding yourself and your needs and your defense mechanisms and your particular likes and dislikes and all of that, and how all of that interacts with your environment and some of the things that you're not able to control. So managing expectations, but also giving yourself a lot of grace, and you can be looking for ways to get better and heal, if you will. I know that that's kind of a thing for a lot of people in this space. It's like, I don't want to learn how to live with this. I just want to learn how to make it go away. And if there's an answer for your particular condition to make the pain go away, then by all means do it. If you haven't found that answer yet, I just really encourage you to give yourself a try and coming up with plans and backup plans and accommodations for yourself, and to let go of the guilt and the perfectionism of needing to be able to do everything on your own or to your max capacity because you feel like that's morally the right thing that you're supposed to do. Oh, and I got distracted earlier because my kids were talking to me, but I wanted to share that when we're working on like exposure, which is a very loaded word in the chronic illness space and also in the neurodivergent space, which I get, but in essence, like that is what any brain retraining program is doing. It's exposure, and preferably, although this is not the case in all of those programs, I've heard some really awful horror stories, preferably it's exposure plus safety. So you expose yourself to a fear and then you realize that nothing bad happens, and then your nervous system learns to like trust that thing again, and it stops responding with so much fear. That doesn't work for a lot of people with chronic illness because their symptoms are not a result of fear. Their symptoms are a result of an autoimmune condition or a genetic tissue disorder or a neurological condition, right? And so what ends up happening when you go through these programs is you like feel like it's your fault, like you, and some of these programs, they tell you to, like, you're just not believing hard enough, you're not trying hard enough, you're thinking about your pain too much, and that is what your issue is. Exposure work and chronic illness only works when there is also a lot of safety inherent in the things that you're doing. So for example, with me like walking around with these weights in a hot park, this is a very titrated thing that I'm doing. It is very, very, very low doses, very small doses, right? So I know what my tolerance level is because I know my body really well. So I think one of the things that people will often say is that they don't know what their tolerance level is, and I think this can be true. This can be true. But I think what's usually more likely is that they actually do know what their tolerance level is, but it's so much lower than the threshold that they wish they had. And so they can't come to terms with it. There's a cognitive dissonance there, of like, I just don't know what my tolerance is, because it's too hard for their brain to really admit that their tolerance might be 3 minutes outside. So like maybe they can't even get to the park. You know, right now was not only able to get my kids into the car, drive to the park, get out of the park, deal with this heat, which again, it's not as hot as it was earlier this week, and walk for 10 minutes with 4-pound dumbbells in my hands. I couldn't do that years ago. Like, I could not do that, that has ebbed and flowed too. There's been times where I could do that, and then I couldn't again, and then I could do it again, and then I couldn't. Like, it's ebbed and flowed because that's just the reality of living with a chronic illness. And so I think that when people don't know what their tolerance level is, I think what's actually happening for the most part is that their tolerance level is just so much lower than they want it to be. And that's too hard to talk about. It's too much grief. It has too much shame wrapped up in it for them. And so they simply can't admit it to like themselves that their tolerance level is so low. So then they end up continuing, you know, in the boom and bust cycle, which is, I'm going to just go, I'm just going to do it, and I'm just going to like basically hope for the best and hope that I just don't have a flare up, right? And then usually they do, because it was so much further beyond their capacity. And so if you are kind of in this brain retraining, cure your illness kind of space, I want you to know there's so much more nuance than what they're probably telling you. You can do some retraining of your brain and nervous system, but only really to a certain extent, and I can't tell you what that extent is. Everybody's body is different. And only in titrated small doses with a lot of support and a lot of self-compassion and a lot of listening to your body and all of that. And so that is what a long-term therapeutic relationship with a therapist who specializes in chronic illness can do for you. It's not so much that they have some magic answer, trust me, they don't. It's that they can see you, hear you, understand you, respond to you with compassion, which doesn't always mean validating everything you say. I know some people really feel like therapy is just all about validating, and it's not. It's responding with compassion and validating and condoning something are all different things. So I am currently training myself to be able to walk in the heat, but I don't know what the end goal is. I don't know if my goal is to be able to go all day in the heat. Is it, 8 hours at a time? And, so I don't know actually when I'm thinking about this exercise tolerance that I'm trying to build. I don't know if my goal is to be able to tolerate an hour out here, 5 hours out here, and then, or 2-day backpacking trips. Like, I don't know what my body is fully capable of, and so all I can actually focus on is doing just a little bit more than I did. I almost said is doing a little bit more than I did yesterday, but actually even that is wrong. Because of the dynamic nature of chronic illness, my goal is to simply listen to what my body can handle each and every day. And so if that means that my baseline is lower on a certain day, and I listen to that, I know my nervous system is learning to trust me. And that's really important to me. Trust is everything, especially with yourself. And so the more my nervous system learns to trust me, the more it's going to be able to actually do some of the harder things sometimes. And it doesn't mean it'll do it without any flare-ups. It just means, like, let's say like I have a concert coming up in August. I'm going to see Jack Johnson with my sister. I know that like being out late is really hard on me. It usually gives me a migraine the next day. that is likely to happen when I do that, but I know I can at least tolerate that activity, even if it has some ramifications on the other end, because I've been doing this slow, titrated exposure work for myself to be able to tolerate difficult feelings and sensations. So drop your questions below. I would love to know what questions this brought up for you, and that's all I got for now.